I'm Laura Fry at Stone Garden Farm in Ohio, and one of the homesteading classes that we do is soap making. And because of the new corona thing that's going on, I thought it might be good to make sort of a more affordable and super effective homemade soap. So generally when I make soaps, I do really fancy ones with essential oils and additives, and I do a cold process. But right now we're going to make more of a homesteader soap. So we're going to make a lard soap. And everybody's probably familiar with lard and lime soap. It's super cleansing. It actually has nice stable lather. It has a nice creaminess to it. And mainly since it's so cleansing, but it also isn't drying, it's really good for laundry soap. You can use it in shampoo. It's kind of a good all-encompassing soap. So what we're going to use today are you're going to want a pair of gloves. A stick blender is not essential, but it makes the process a lot faster. You're going to need some type of digital or food scale because we're going to measure everything by weight and not volume. You're going to want some type of eye protection. You're going to need any type of molds, and you can use old drawers, wooden drawers. You can use wooden molds, you can use silicone molds, whatever you want that's going to put your soap in the shape that you want it. Of course, you're going to need some lard, and lard is rendered pig fat. You could use rendered fat from any animal. You could use tallow from beef or deer. You could also use actually any oil at all. You could use vegetable oil, but of course for lard soap, we're going to use some lard, and we just rendered this a couple days ago. So we also are going to add some glycerin, and that's going to be just one of our personal additives, and that's going to add some extra lather. We're going to use some sodium lactate, which is going to make a harder bar, and we'll go over these additives a little bit more later. We're going to use castor oil, and that's going to add some emollient properties, so it'll make it more moisturizing, and it'll hold your face or your skin moisture in. You're going to need something to measure with, and of course you're going to need lye or sodium hydroxide, like a granulated, and I think that's it, so let's get started. So this video will be slightly chaotic because we're doing it with the help of our 5 children. This is Ada, and she's my right-hand lady. This is Addie, and she's my little right-hand lady. And Leah is filming. Say hi, Leah. Hi, Leah. So a little bit more about the additives. You actually don't need any additives at all. You can just make this soap with 100% lard, water, and lye. That's all you need. However, it's hard for me to not add a couple little tweaks to make it a sort of a better quality soap. So I'm going to add this glycerin, and glycerin is actually it's like a vegetable derivative, so it's naturally based. There's nothing synthetic, and any type of sugar that you add or any type of sweetener or like honey or granulated sugar or even beer that has those sugars in it, it's going to add a nice good lather to your soap. So the reason I add the glycerin is because it's natural and it's just kind of a good way to sort of add a little bit of that extra lather. Leah, Ada, could you grab him? The castor oil that we're using, like I said, it has emollient properties, so it's really going to help lock in some of that moisture, and it adds a little bit more of a toning quality to the soap where it doesn't exactly, it just keeps it to where your skin feels nice and smooth and silky after you're done. Oh, I don't have it here actually, but we are going to add a small amount of coconut oil. And the reason that we're adding coconut oil is because any saturated fat, whether it's lard or tallow or coconut oil, it has a lot of lauric acid, and that basically adds lots and lots of bubbles, lots and lots of lather. The lard on its own will have lather, and it will be bubbly. However, it has stable bubbles, but they're a little bit larger. And if you really want to get that sort of tight bubble foam like you're used to with store-bought soap that uses all the detergents and synthetic stuff in there, the coconut oil addition is really going to give you kind of like more of the lather that you're going to want to look for. So it adds cleansing properties, and it adds some extra lather. With lard soap, honestly, it's so hard, and this oil is a natural blender. It's not really necessary, but I really like to just add that, especially with a hot process, because we're going to be using it kind of right as soon as we make it. The benefit of hot process is you can use it within 24 hours, or with a cold process, although you have a little bit more playroom with it because it's much softer, and you don't have that heat, so you can use essential oils. You can't use it for a while. You have to wait about 3 weeks or more before it's completely saponified, which means all the oils and the sodium hydroxide have really melded together and had that chemical change to where it's soap and it's not oil. This is your 1,000,000 pounds of fat rendering. So you know this is like a 4-gallon pot to give you an idea. So why in the world would you use oil to wash your skin? Seems kind of weird, doesn't it? But the reason that it works is because when you add sodium hydroxide to any type of oil, whether it's olive oil or coconut oil or lard, it actually has a chemical reaction. And so generally if you actually I think I have an example. This is something weird the kids made, but it's water, colored water with oil floating on top. So water and oil clearly separate. Oil is made up of fatty acid chains, and both sides of those fatty acid chains attract to oil and repel water. So whenever you mix a sodium hydroxide with any type of oil, such as lard, it has this chemical reaction where it actually kind of ends up looking sort of like, on a molecular level, like a dandelion puffball, where all the one side of the chain attracts to oil, but the other side is actually going to attract to water. So then when you use this soap, this saponified oil, to wash your skin or wash your hair, wash your dishes, all the oil that's on that stuff is going to attract to the water you're washing with. So it actually just makes the water more effective. The main reason that people feel daunted about making lye soap at home is because lye is sort of thought to be pretty dangerous. And lye can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, but it's not really any more dangerous than, say, having bleach in the house. The reason that lye is dangerous is because when it comes in contact with anything liquid like water, it absorbs that liquid and it has this chemical reaction that heats it up instantly, super hot, almost to the point of boiling. It's hygroscopic, which means it just absorbs water, so you have to keep it in a closed, airtight container, or it will absorb all the air from the environment and it will sort of like harden up. But say, for example, if you spilled lye here on the table and then I went to put my hand on the table, you'll feel it and it'll burn. It'll feel like it burns a little bit, but you just wash it off, and I've never seen anybody have a super intense reaction on their skin. However, if it gets into a mucous membrane, like in your lips or in your eyes or in your nose, then it can be very dangerous. So you want to, whenever you're using liquid lye, or even if you're just doing the powder lye, wear goggles if you don't feel secure. Gloves are always a good idea. And not having little kids running around under feet when you're dealing with the lye is also a really good idea. Anytime you're doing lye activities, you want to have a window open and have a big aired room, because it does have some off-gassing fumes that kind of can take your breath away. You never want to put your face right over it when you're mixing it, so those are some precautions. So I've actually already measured out this lye, and this is a granulated lye that I got from some friends in Amish country. You can actually buy it at like an Ace Hardware store, different places like that you can find it. It's pretty cost effective, not crazy expensive. So all the soap ingredients are going to have to be measured by weight and not volume. So you have to have a scale here. So what that means is if your recipe calls for 16 ounces of lard, you cannot get a measuring scoop and scoop out 2 cups of lard. You have to do it by weight. The reason that is because all different oils have different densities. So for example, if you're scooping the lard, well, there's going to be some air pockets, and you're not going to have that exact amount of lipids or fats compared to that amount of sodium hydroxide or lye. Some soap is not as forgiving as some arts, and I tend to be more of a just throw everything in the pot type of cook. But with soap, you really have to be a little more specific, because if you don't have your ratios correct and you have too much lye, then your soap can be super saturated in lye and you'll end up with some lye pockets. Your soap will be very drying, it won't really cure properly, and then if you have too much oil and not enough lye, it won't saponify all the way, and then you'll end up with sort of a soft soap or a soap that separates with an oil line, which you can still rebatch though, so it's not a total loss. But it's better to just kind of get your ratios on point the first time. So I already measured out this sodium hydroxide, and it's here, and I showed you the recipe already. So I've also already measured out my water, and if you want to come over here, Leah. So you always, again, want to do this in a very open place with lots of airflow. You want to make sure that the pot you're using is something that's heat-proof, and it's on a heat-proof surface. This is a wooden cutting board. You never ever want to use aluminum at all in your soap making, because the aluminum can actually the lye can eat into the aluminum, and that will then discolor your soap, and of course you have aluminum in your soap, and it can pit into your pots and kind of ruin them. Even your whisks and everything have to be stainless steel or some other material. So you always start out with very, very cold water. You want to use either well water or something that doesn't have a lot of additives, like, you know, bleaches and fluorides or whatever. So the most natural water you can come up with. Always start with very cold, because it's going to heat up immediately. And you always, always, always want to add your lye to your water, never your water to your lye, okay? So I'm going to kind of slowly pour this. Again, you want to be very careful that everything around you is kind of secure and you know what's going on. I'm slowly pouring, and I'm whisking as I'm pouring. Put a little bit and mix it all the way. A little bit, mix it, and as I'm doing this, it's heating up. is heating up a lot. And if you want to step back, Leah, you might be able to see the fumes. This is going to heat up to at least 180 degrees. And I can actually smell some of the fumes. These are a few of my most popular cold process soaps. I use all essential oils and plant-based colorants. It's still going. If you wanted to do a milk soap where you're using milk instead of the water, you would basically use milk here instead of water. However, it would actually be better to partially freeze the milk or add the lye in teeny tiny increments at a time and keep a thermometer here. And you would want to keep that milk below 90 degrees if you didn't, and then if you wanted to get a nice white creamy soap. Can you see that steam? Let me see if you can get a picture of the steam. Get all your lye.
Can't really see the steam.
Well, it's steaming, we promise. Right now, if you touch this, it's actually too hot to touch. And I can get a thermometer in a minute and show you the temperature. You can pause. As you can see, the lye gets pretty darn hot. Weighing out my lard to put in the pot to melt. Fast grab for more lard. Good thing I rendered 8 gallons. So this is the lard all measured out. Any oil that you mix with your lye has to be liquid. So lard is not liquid at room temperature. So we're actually going to heat this up. We're not going to heat it hot. It needs to be below about 110 degrees before we can combine it with our lye. And the lye also needs to be about below 110 degrees. So I'm going to put it on the heat, but just melt it, not heat it up a lot. Okay. Measuring out the castor oil, again by weight and not volume. I honestly shouldn't be adding this castor oil in until the lard has been completely melted, but I got a little overzealous. Same thing here, just adding the coconut oil, and we're going to put that in the pot to melt it. So the lye is still pretty hot, but it's cooling down. It's not cool enough yet to combine with the oil. But I'm going to go ahead and put in the sodium lactate and the glycerin, which again are totally optional. It's about a teaspoon per pound. We have 8-pound batch here, so it's going to be about 8 teaspoons, but I'm going to kind of eyeball it. That's what I do best. And I just want to say the reason that we are adding it to the lye water is because both the sodium lactate and the glycerin are water-based. So they sort of combine better this way than adding them directly to the oil. The ratio with the glycerin is, again, about the same, 1 teaspoon per pound. Kind of depends on your recipe, but I usually just eyeball. I'm going to go ahead and get my molds ready, only because with hot process, that means basically we're going to combine everything, put it on the heat, and we're going to heat it up. And it's going, the whole thing, I mean, it might take maybe 20 minutes, start to finish, maybe a little bit more. But once it's ready, it goes from like not ready to overdone real quick, so you really have to have everything ready to go. You can't wait until your soap is ready to pour into your molds to go ahead and get your molds ready. So we are doing an 8-pound batch, and that is going, these are all 2-pound molds. So I have obviously 4, but sometimes because I'm not really sure how much of the moisture is going to completely render out, and of course we add an extra volume with the water, it might supersede the amount that these molds are going to hold. So we're going to have an extra mold ready just in case. Actually, I might do this cool mold. This is actually a really fun mold because it has, if you can see, these cool little designs. However, with hot process, it may not really hold these designs as well as the cold process.
Yeah. Mom, is there a big chunk of things in there?
Our beautiful assistant Adeline is holding up our additives, indigo powder, and activated charcoal. Okay, the oil is melted, but it's still under 110 degrees. There's just one little chunk, but it's kind of getting there, so I'm going to let it go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mix the lye in. Notice that I have goggles on and I have gloves, because when you're pouring liquid lye, it can be dangerous if you get in your eyes. So I'm leaving that on for protection. I'm going to go ahead and very slowly pour this lye water in. And as soon as I pour it in, I'm going to whisk it. Pour slow so you can avoid splashing. It's better actually to have somebody to stir while you're pouring, but I think I'll be able to pull it off. Get every little bit in. Okay. And then you're gonna kind of use your whisk or just a spoon to slowly, again, don't knock it around because you're gonna splash and you do not want splashing lye water all over your face. So careful stirs, just until it's all incorporated. Okay, now if you're gonna make cold process soap, what we would do now is this would not be on the stove. This would be sitting on the table. We would be whisking and stirring, and continuing to whisk and stir until the soap comes to what's called a trace. And what that means is it has saponified enough to where it's solidified to the point that it almost looks like pancake batter. And when you lift a scoop up and drop it on here, you're gonna see a line sitting on top. Kind of like, like cake batter or pancake batter. And then once it's come to that trace, then you would put in whatever additives you wanted, whether it's poppy seeds or annatto seed or fragrance or whatever, and then you would pour it into your mold. At that point, you would leave it in your mold about a day, take it out, and then you would cut it and let it cure for 3 to 4 weeks. That's really cool, but that's not what we're doing today. We're doing a hot process. So now we mixed it and we're putting it on the heat. I'm going to put it about medium-high, and I'm going to leave it on medium-high until it really starts to bubble. And we're using this heat to hasten the process of the saponification. So basically, after about maybe 5 minutes, it'll get to the point that it's bubbling. Then it's going to take maybe 15, 20 more minutes, and it will get to the point of the trace that I mentioned, but we're actually looking for sort of having it go through a gel phase, and it's going to almost look translucent, and then we're going to have more almost like a brownie batter consistency before we're ready to put it into our mold, because all the saponification is happening now. It's rendering out all the moisture as it's heating, and it'll be steaming out. So we'll show you all the steps. Just as a note, this is a homestead soap class where I'm not really getting into any of the intricacies of the additives and the essential oils versus the fragrance oils versus the different densities of the oils and how they affect your soap, or into the science behind how you come up with your soap recipe. I will do a video on that later, but right now this is just more of a kind of do-it-yourself beginner soap. Although you can certainly blend this by hand, it is much, much quicker to use an immersion blender or a stick blender, and it just makes everything move faster and makes the saponification happen quicker. When this first starts to heat up, this is kind of what you're going to be seeing. Some chunks and foam on top of liquid. Just keep blending, just keep blending, just keep blending, blending, blending. What do? We blend, blend. Still stirring here. This is an 8-pound batch, so it takes longer than you might imagine. If you do a 1 or 2 pound batch, it will be much quicker than this. You can see that the consistency is changing. Instead of all being one consistency, now you can literally see small chunks of soap floating on the liquid. We're going to continue to do this until all of it is a uniform consistency of the thicker stuff that you're seeing floating on the top. Okay, so this has been cooking for a while. You can see how much it expands, so it's very important to have lots of headroom in your pot because this is like almost boiling over. I've turned it down a little bit because it's kind of shooting dangerous light bubbles everywhere, which is obviously dangerous. I have my goggles on and my gloves. And I've been kind of periodically doing the stick blender versus the spoon back and forth. And if you can look, you can actually see now it's kind of, before it was a lot of liquid underneath bubbles, and now the consistency is getting to where it's kind of uniform all the way through, and that's what you're looking for. So as I'm stirring, I'm not pulling up any liquid, it's all kind of uniform. It's getting there to where it's almost completely saponified, but it's not there yet. So we're still going, but we're getting close, and pretty soon this is going to fall and all this foam will go out, and it'll just be kind of like a thick, dense, almost translucent soap at the bottom, a liquid soap, and back up a little bit there. And then we're going to put it in our molds. I'm actually going to attempt to pour half of this in another pot because I want to add some indigo powder, which is just a blue colorant. It's a natural root, it's a natural dye, and some charcoal, activated charcoal, and that's going to add some detoxifying qualities. The rest I'm going to leave regular.
This is dangerous. Do not repeat at home.
Okay. Actually, that's probably, I filled that a little too high. I'm going to dump a little back. Let me do it this way. That's because you want to have space in case it expands. Okay, so there you have it, and now I'm just going to keep doing the same thing to both pots. I'm about to pour this in the mold, so you can see it's all kind of thick, Consistency is kind of uniform. You can see it's kind of getting to the translucent stage. I guess I'll give it 1 more minute to get to the translucent stage. 1 more minute to get to the translucent stage. See how this one is still kind of liquidy? So I'm going to give that just another minute, but that's great because now we have time to pour our first one in before the second one is ready. So that's another couple of minutes. Keep looking at this one though and see how it's changing even as we're talking to get a little bit more. You got to get really close, Thea. Up top and close. So it's getting more translucent. The consistency is still changing. It's looking more solid and less grainy. It's no longer chunks floating in liquid. Now it's like, almost looks like some soap. It's getting thick like applesauce. That's what we want. Okay, and I think it's pretty much 1 more little minute. I want it, right now it's, there's some of that white. I want it to be a little more all translucent throughout. Okay, cutting it off. And now I'm going to bring this with me over here. And I'm going to start putting this in some of these molds. They're silicone molds, so they're heat resistant. And as I do pour this, if you can look, it's still going to expand a little bit. So I'm going to have to kind of knock it down like this to really get the, you want it to be, you don't want any like air pockets in there because it's so thick at this point that it will actually form some air pockets. You allow it to, so you got to keep on knocking it. Even for like 10 minutes or so, we're going to have to keep doing just a little bit of a knocking. And as it loses more water, it's going to lose volume a little bit. So I like to overfill just a little bit. This one I'm going to do half with this regular. I'm going to put that blue indigo on top. Now be careful when you smack this down because it can pop up. So you still want your goggles on. You don't want to put your face right over. You just be cautious and aware of the fact that it does kind of plop out. Okay, now let's check on our blue soap. It's getting there, but not quite there yet. But it's getting closer. But it's still got some liquid, so that's going to be, it's going to be a minute. Don't touch it. Going to keep knocking this down. We'll have this one, and Addie, I need my other mold, please. Go get my other mold. And the other one we're going to, I think there might be enough of that, honestly, to put in this big red one. So I might just fill up the rest of this little blue mold and then fill it up all in that one. Is what I'm thinking once it gets... Pretty cool. It's almost there, but it still seems like there's a little bit of separated oil that I really want to combine. So just 1 more minute. I've expanded when I let them sit. It's because there's air pockets. So I'm going to knock it down to get those air bubbles out. See the consistency there? Knock this down. See all the steam coming out? And now it's going back down. If you don't, you're going to have all these bubbles in your soap. It's going to look like a loaf of sourdough bread. So you knock it, knock it, knock it. And that forces all the air to the surface. It's pretty much at that stage. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to empty it into this mold and do sort of like a loaf. But I'm going to save enough to fill up this last mold. It's not too hot. Can I do this? Might be too hot. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to scoop these away. Put this one over here. I'm just going to balance. Okay. Addie, get back, please. every little bit. You have to do it kind of fast because it does harden up somewhat quick on you. So you don't want to dally. That's one negative about the hot process. You don't have a lot of playtime to say do fancy swirls and things like you do with the cold process. But again, we can use this pretty much immediately. And that is a major benefit. Just a minute. What I might do is pour this whole thing in there. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? I think I will.
Not a pretty little penny have I got to show. I ain't looking for much, just a little bit of rest by the side of the road. I lift my voice to the forces above, the lords of labor and the goddess of love. Ain't I been a good, hard working, faithful servant and son?
All right, guys, it's in the mold. It's going to sit for a day, maybe a day and a half, and then we'll take it out and cut it and see what we have. Okay, it's time to unmold. This has been sitting about 2 days. We left it a little longer than necessary, and it looks kind of like this. So that rough top actually is kind of cool, but that happens because of the hot process, because it's so thick when you're putting it in. It's already kind of hardened. So it pops out pretty easily from the mold, especially since it's been in a couple days. It's lost a lot of the moisture. So it's a nice hard block. Again, this is basically ready to use right away. You can just cut this. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and just start cutting these. You can cut them any size you want. You want to try to get them, you know, sort of uniform to the same thickness at the bottom or the top. It is easier to accidentally cut it thicker at the bottom. Okay, if you look in here, see it's very consistent. There's a little bit of a color difference because of maybe a gel phase that it went through, but it's very solid. It's not porous, which means it won't hold in moisture, so it's a very long-lasting soap. And I'll just do one more so you can get another visual, and then we'll cut the one that we put the indigo and the charcoal in. The charcoal is a good detox inclusion, and the indigo is just like a beautiful colorant. So that's what we're kind of left with, and we'll cut the rest of these also. This was an 8-pound batch, which means the amount of oil we added was 8 pounds. So once all the moisture is rendered out, we should be left with 8 pounds of soap. So I'm actually going to cut these kind of big because I think it might be fun to give people big chunks of soap that they can then take home and cut. So I'm not going to cut these tiny. Now, since this was so cost effective, you could actually use this and grate it right into your laundry as a laundry soap because it's so cleansing, and we didn't add anything fancy like, you know, for extra like moisturizing or anything. So it wouldn't like leave your clothes all greasy. Wow, look how cool that is. You see that? Let me cut this. See that? Just a swirl effect from the indigo charcoal and then the uncolored soap. Maybe let's do 2 big blocks. These are probably close to 1-pound blocks, you might say. So check it out. Pretty cool. Now we'll set it up so you can see how it's going to look. How does it feel, guys?
Really good. Hands are clean. Feels so good. Soft.